Have you ever noticed something strange about life? Two people can go through almost the exact same experience and somehow come out of it completely differently. One person loses a job and thinks, my life is falling apart. Another loses a job and thinks, maybe this is a push I needed. One person hears criticism and thinks, they're right, I'm not good enough. Another hears the same criticism and thinks, maybe there's something here I can improve. Same event, different interpretation, and eventually, different life. So what creates that difference? Is it luck, intelligence, money, connections, or is there something happening much earlier, before the result ever appears? That is a question Jeff Keller explores in his book, Attitude is Everything. But this isn't simply a book about thinking positive, and that's important. Because if you've ever been told to just think positively while you're dealing with a real problem, you know how frustrating that advice can sound. Keller isn't saying that problems aren't real. He's saying something more practical. You don't always control what happens to you, but your attitude influences what you do with what happens, and that can change the direction of your life. Keller organizes the book into 3 parts: think, speak, act. First, you change what's happening inside your mind. Then you become aware of the words coming out of your mouth. And finally, you turn those changes into action. Because thinking without speaking differently is incomplete. Speaking differently without acting is incomplete. And action without the right attitude often collapses when things get difficult. So, let's take this journey the way Keller designed it. Started with the place where every change begins. Your mind. Part 1. Success begins in the mind. Before we get into the first lesson, there's something personal about Jeff Keller that makes this book more interesting. Keller openly describes having a negative attitude and doubting himself for many years. He says the positive changes in his own life came from practicing the principles he teaches in the book, and that's worth remembering. He's not presenting these ideas as if he's always had everything figured out. He learned them, practiced them, and built his work around them. Now, let's look at the first lesson. Lesson 1. Your attitude is your window to the world. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and putting on a pair of sunglasses. But these aren't ordinary sunglasses. They're permanently tinted. Everything you see passes through that color. You look at your job, you see problems. You meet someone new, you expect disappointment. Something goes wrong. You think, of course. You receive good news. You immediately wonder how long it will last. The world hasn't necessarily changed, but the way you're seeing it has. That's Keller's idea behind the first lesson. Your attitude acts like a window through which you view the world. If your window is covered in negativity, your entire experience can look negative. And here's where this becomes personal. Think about the last time something went wrong. Did you immediately ask, why does this always happen to me? Or did you ask, what can I do about this? Those 2 questions may sound similar. They aren't. The first puts you in the position of a victim. The second puts you back in the position of someone who can act. Keller isn't promising that a positive attitude will make every bad event disappear. Instead, he is asking you to recognize your role in determining how you respond. Because your attitude affects what you notice. What you notice affects what you believe. What you believe affects what you do. And what you do affects your results. Which brings us to Keller's second lesson. If your attitude influences the way you see the world, then what happens when you carry that attitude everywhere? Lesson 2. You're a human magnet. Keller calls us human magnets. The idea is simple. What you consistently think about and focus on influences what you attract, notice, and move toward. Now, this doesn't mean the universe is a vending machine. Think about money, and money magically appears. Think about success, and success knocks on your door. That's not what makes this idea useful. Think about your own attention. If you start looking for opportunities, you notice opportunities you previously ignored. If you expect people to be hostile, you notice every small sign of rejection. If you believe nobody supports you, you'll remember the people who disappointed you and overlook the people who tried. Your expectations influence your attention, and your attention influences your experience. So Keller encourages us to become more conscious about what we're focusing on, not because positive thinking magically controls reality, but because your mental focus affects what you see, what you attempt, and what you believe is possible. And once you know where you're going, you need something even more powerful. A picture of it. Lesson 3. Picture your way to success. Think about a goal you've had for a long time. Maybe you want a better career, a healthier body, a stronger relationship, a business, financial freedom, or simply a life that feels more meaningful. Now ask yourself, can you clearly picture it? Keller emphasizes visualization. The idea is to create a mental picture of the outcome you want. Why? Because a vague goal creates vague action. Imagine telling someone, just drive somewhere. They'll ask, where? You say, I don't know. They can't get you there. But give them a destination, and suddenly there's a direction. Your mind needs direction too. Keller encourages readers to picture the life they want and mentally rehearse success. But there's an important distinction. Visualization isn't sitting on the couch imagining a better life while doing nothing. It's about creating a clear target. You see the destination, and then you move toward it, and that leads to the next lesson. Because knowing what you want isn't enough. At some point, you have to decide that you're actually going after it. Lesson 4. Make a commitment, and you'll move mountains. There's a huge difference between saying, I'd like to, and saying, I will. Think about how often we use soft language. I'd like to lose weight. I'd like to start a business. I'd like to write a book. I'd like to become more confident. I'd like to. It sounds harmless, but it leaves the door open for us to walk away. Commitment closes that door. When you genuinely commit to something, your brain starts looking for ways to make it happen. You become more persistent. You tolerate inconvenience. You stop negotiating with yourself every morning. And Keller's point is that commitment gives you a different level of energy, because there's a difference between wishing for a result and deciding that you're going to pursue it. But then something happens. You commit. You start moving. And suddenly, a problem appears. That's where many people quit. Keller doesn't. Instead, he asks us to look at problems differently. Lesson 5. Turn your problems into opportunities. Nobody gets through life without problems. The question isn't, how do I build a life with no problems? That's impossible. The better question is, how do I respond when problems arrive? Imagine 2 people lose their jobs. One says, this proves I'm a failure. The other says, this forces me to think about what I really want. The problem is the same. The meaning is different, and that meaning influences the next action. Keller encourages us to look for the opportunity hidden inside difficulty. Sometimes a rejection teaches you something. Sometimes a failure exposes a weakness. Sometimes an unexpected change forces you to discover an ability you didn't know you had. This doesn't mean every painful experience is secretly wonderful. Some experiences hurt. Some losses are genuinely devastating. But even when you can't control the event, you can eventually ask, what can I learn? What can I do now? That question moves you forward. And now Keller makes a very important transition, because everything we've discussed so far has happened largely inside your mind. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your expectations, your vision, your commitment. But those thoughts don't stay inside your head. They eventually come out through your words. And that's where part 2 begins. Part 2, watch your words. Keller's message now becomes very practical. Listen to yourself, not just occasionally. Really listen. What do you say when you wake up? What do you say when something goes wrong? What do you say about yourself? What do you say about your future? Because your words reveal your attitude, and sometimes they reinforce it. Lesson 6. Your words blaze a trail. Think about 2 sentences. I can't do this. And I haven't learned how to do this yet. They describe almost the same situation, but emotionally, they are completely different. The first creates a wall. The second creates a possibility. This is what Keller means when he talks about words blazing a trail. Your repeated language helps establish the direction of your thinking. If you constantly say, I'm unlucky, nothing works for me, people are against me, I'll never succeed, you are rehearsing a particular story. And the more familiar that story becomes, the easier it is to believe. So Keller encourages us to become conscious of our language, not fake language. Not pretending everything is perfect, but language that leaves room for possibility. Instead of, I can't, try, I'll find a way. Instead of, this is impossible, try, let's see what I can do. Instead of, I'll never get there, try, I'm not there yet. The difference may seem small, but small changes in language can change the questions your mind starts asking. And that brings us to one of the simplest lessons in the book. A question you probably hear every day. Lesson 7. How are you? Someone asks, how are you? And what do we usually say? I'm fine. Terrible. Exhausted. Busy. Same old. Keller asks us to pay attention to this everyday exchange because our automatic responses can reinforce the attitude we're carrying. Imagine starting every morning by announcing how exhausted, stressed, unlucky, or frustrated you are. Eventually, those words can become part of your mental script. So, why not become more intentional? This doesn't mean lying. If you're having a difficult day, you don't need to pretend you're having the best day of your life, but you can answer from a position of possibility. I'm doing well. I'm working through it. I'm getting better. I'm looking forward to today. Sometimes the first person who needs to hear your words is you. And Keller then takes us towards something even more common, something almost everyone does, something that feels harmless. Complaining. Lesson 8. Stop complaining. Let's be honest. Complaining feels good. For a moment, you tell someone how annoying your boss is, how terrible the traffic was, how unfair someone treated you, how difficult your life has become. And for a few seconds, you feel lighter. But then what? The problem is still there. And now you've spent even more time focusing on it. Keller's point isn't that you should never discuss problems. Sometimes you need to talk. Sometimes you need advice. Sometimes something genuinely needs to be fixed. But there's a difference between solving a problem and rehearsing a problem. One moves you forward. The other keeps you stuck. So the next time you catch yourself complaining, pause. Ask, what can I do about this? If there's an action, take it. If there isn't, ask whether continuing to complain will actually help. That one question can interrupt an enormous amount of negativity. And now the book reaches its third and final stage, because you can think positively, you can speak positively, you can visualize your goals, you can change your language. But none of it matters if you refuse to move. And Keller makes that point very clearly. Heaven helps those who act. Part 3. Heaven helps those who act. This is where dreams meet reality. You can have the perfect plan, the perfect vision, the perfect attitude. But eventually, you have to do something. And the first thing you need to deal with is the people around you. Lesson 9. Associate with positive people. Have you ever spent an hour with someone who complains about everything? When you leave, how do you feel? Probably heavier. Now think about spending time with someone who is optimistic, ambitious, curious, and solution-oriented. You may leave feeling different. Why? Because attitudes are contagious. The people around you influence your conversations, your expectations, your beliefs, even what you consider normal. Keller encourages us to associate with positive people, not people who pretend life is perfect, people who look for solutions, people who encourage growth, people who challenge you to become better. And this doesn't mean abandoning everyone who is struggling. It means becoming intentional about who has the strongest influence on your thinking. Because if everyone around you constantly says, "Don't try, it's impossible," people like us can't do that. Eventually, you may stop trying too. But even with supportive people around you, there is one obstacle nobody else can remove for you: fear. And Keller goes straight toward it. Lesson 10. Confront your fears and grow. What are you afraid of? Not the obvious answer. Think deeper. What have you been avoiding? Maybe public speaking. Maybe asking for a promotion. Maybe changing careers. Maybe starting something of your own. Maybe telling someone how you really feel. Maybe hearing the word no. Keller discusses these kinds of fears because fear quietly controls enormous parts of people's lives. And here's the problem. Avoidance makes fear stronger. You avoid the thing. You feel temporary relief. Your brain learns. Good decision. That thing was dangerous. So next time, the fear becomes even stronger. The way out is often the opposite. Face it, not recklessly, not by forcing yourself into the deepest possible end. Start small. If you're afraid of speaking, speak to one person, then a few, then a small group. If you're afraid of rejection, make one request. If you're afraid of failure, take one manageable risk. Each time you act despite fear, you teach yourself something new. I can handle this. And that's how confidence grows. Not by waiting for fear to disappear, but by proving to yourself that you can move while fear is present. And this leads naturally to Keller's next lesson. Because once you start taking risks, you are going to fail sometimes. Lesson 11. Get out there and fail. This may be one of the hardest lessons to accept. Nobody wants to fail. We want the successful business, the perfect relationship, the promotion, the finished project, the applause. We don't want the embarrassing beginning. But Keller challenges that mindset, because failure isn't necessarily evidence that you should stop. Sometimes failure is simply evidence that you're doing something difficult. Think about learning to walk. A child doesn't take one perfect step and suddenly become an expert. They fall again and again. But nobody looks at a baby falling and says, "Well, clearly walking isn't for you." We understand that falling is part of learning. Yet, as adults, we often treat failure differently. We fail once and turn it into an identity. I failed becomes, I'm a failure. That's a dangerous transformation. A failed attempt is an event. It doesn't have to become your identity. So Keller encourages us to get out there, try, risk rejection, take action, and understand that failure is often part of the price of progress. Because if you're unwilling to fail, you may become unwilling to try. And if you stop trying, your potential stays theoretical. But Keller doesn't end the book with fear or failure. He ends with something extremely practical. People, connections, opportunities. Lesson 12. Networking that gets results. Success rarely happens completely alone. Think about almost any meaningful opportunity in your life. A job, a business connection, a mentor, a friendship, a client, a recommendation, a collaboration. At some point, another human being was involved. Keller's final lesson is about networking. But networking isn't simply collecting business cards. It's not walking into a room and asking, "What can you do for me?" Real networking is about building genuine relationships, getting to know people, listening, helping, following up, staying connected, and being willing to introduce yourself instead of waiting for opportunities to magically find you. This brings the entire book together, because notice the progression. First, think. Change the way you see yourself and your possibilities. Then, speak. Become aware of the language you're using and the attitude you're reinforcing. Then, act. Face fear. Accept failure. Build relationships. Move toward the life you want. Think. Speak. Act. The three parts aren't separate. They're connected. And when all three begin working together, something changes. So, what does attitude really mean? Let's come back to the question we started with. Does attitude control everything? No. Life is more complicated than that. You cannot think your way out of every problem. You cannot visualize away every loss. You cannot use positive words to control other people. And you certainly cannot guarantee success simply by having a good attitude. But Keller's message is not that you control everything. It's that you have more influence over your response than you may realize. You can choose what you focus on. You can choose what you repeatedly tell yourself. You can choose the language you use. You can choose whether you keep complaining or look for a solution. You can choose the people you spend time with. You can choose whether you face a fear. You can choose whether a failure becomes a full stop or a comma. And perhaps that's the real power of this book. It doesn't promise you a life without difficulties. It gives you a different way of meeting those difficulties. Imagine waking up tomorrow. Something goes wrong. Your old response appears automatically. This is going to be a terrible day. But you pause. You catch the thought, and you ask, is that actually true? Then something else happens. You choose a different thought. Later, someone annoys you. You feel the urge to complain, but you stop. You ask, what can I do about it? Then something else happens. An opportunity appears, and fear tells you not to take it. But instead of waiting to feel fearless, you take one small step. That is how attitude becomes real, not in a motivational quote, not in a perfect morning routine, not in pretending everything is wonderful, but in hundreds of tiny moments when you choose your response. And eventually, those moments become habits. Those habits become behavior, and your behavior begins shaping your life. Maybe that's why the title of Jeff Keller's book is so simple. Attitude is everything. Not because attitude is the only thing, but because attitude is often where everything else begins. Your thoughts influence your words. Your words influence your actions. Your actions influence your results. And your results eventually influence the life you're living. So, if you're unhappy with where you are right now, Don't immediately assume you need to change everything. Start by looking at the window through which you're seeing your life. Ask yourself, what am I constantly thinking? What am I repeatedly saying? What am I avoiding? What am I expecting? Who am I allowing to influence me? And perhaps the most important question, what am I going to do next? Because the goal isn't to become someone who never has negative thoughts. The goal is to notice them sooner. The goal isn't to never feel afraid. The goal is to stop allowing fear to make every decision. The goal isn't to never fail. The goal is to stop treating failure as proof that you should give up. And the goal isn't to control everything that happens. It's to become the kind of person who can meet whatever happens and still move forward. Jeff Keller's journey began with recognizing that the way he was approaching life wasn't working for him, and his answer became remarkably simple. Think differently, speak differently, act differently, and slowly your life begins to respond, not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you become different inside the world you're living in. So the next time life doesn't go according to plan, pause, look at the situation, and before you ask, why is this happening to me? Ask something more powerful. What can I do with what is happening? That question may not change the event, but it can change the person facing it. And sometimes that's where a completely different life begins. Change your attitude, and you can change your life. If this book gave you even one thought worth carrying into tomorrow, share it with someone who needs it. And if you want more ideas that can quietly change the way you see life, subscribe to Actionable Listener. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep becoming.